Battle Through the Heavens. Episode 193. At the end of the previous episode, the Chief of the Hall of Souls emphasizes that the Hall is vital to the Hun clan's plans and that a full-scale war must wait until those plans are complete. Hun Mo Qian dismisses this caution and declares the decisive battle will be between Mi Sheng and Xiao Yan, with the outcome determining the overall victor. Acknowledging the danger posed by Xiao Yan's cunning and his possession of the purifying demonic Lotus flame, the chief nonetheless steps forward with confidence, expressing his desire to personally test the flame's true power in Xiao Yan's hands. The many pairs of eyes around the mountain range emitted a swoosh sound as they caught the Chief of the Hall of Souls stepping forward. The ferocious name that the Chief of the Hall of Souls once obtained within the Central Plains had reached a stage where one trembled in fear from hearing it. Although he had gradually faded from one's sight because of his prolonged retreat, his fierce reputation had not disappeared even after a long period of time. If one wished to rank the top individuals within the Central Plains, the Chief of the Hall of Souls, Hun Mi Sheng, would take the top seat. 2 draws in 3 battles. This has somewhat surprised this chief, but this will not be able to change the final result. The Chief of the Hall of Souls was 1,000 feet from Xiao Yan when he finally came to a slow stop. He lifted his head and looked at Xiao Yan. A faint smile appeared on his face. His aura was calm as he spoke. His expression did not change because of the current situation. Xiao Yan's exchanged a glance with the Chief of the Hall of Souls. A hidden flow surged and the temperature of the air seemed to have risen at this moment. We should leave room to retreat when doing anything. At times, we should not be overconfident when speaking. Hall Chief should take care of himself. Xiao Yan softly replied, "Haha, the Hall of Souls does not leave anyone alive when doing things. This way of speaking is only for mediocre individuals. If one worries about all this when trying to achieve big things, one would be a little petty." The Chief of the Hall of Souls loudly laughed as he quipped. Everyone felt a little excited in their hearts after hearing this verbal sparring. This fight was the most important one today. One party was the Chief of the Hall of Souls, and from a certain point of view, Xiao Yan could be considered the leader of the Sky Mansion Alliance. The battle between the two of them determined the victor and the loser of this battle. "The clan has criticized me because of you. Back then, I gave the order to dispatch people to the Jiama Empire to capture Xiaojan. My thought was that we should eliminate everyone when making an attack. But this chief had undertaken a retreat to train when the order was issued. Some of my subordinates were a little lazy and only captured Xiaojan since I wasn't around. You managed to escape the many attempts to kill you after that first incident because they all underestimated you. Within a short decade or so, you have reached this level a step at a time." The eyes of the Chief of the Hall of Souls were somewhat complicated as he stared at Xiao Yan. This threat to the Hun clan was someone that they could have eliminated long ago, but due to many unforeseen reasons, they had ended up allowing this threat to grow at a terrifying speed. Now, this threat had reached a level where he could fight on even ground with the Hall of Souls. If one were to toss aside this person's status as an enemy, the Chief of the Hall of Souls felt an admiration for this person in his heart. He had to admit that if it had been him, he would have found it difficult to overcome this strenuous journey and reach the peak of this continent. This chief has an undeniable responsibility in allowing you to grow to this extent. Hence, this time around, I hope to remove that responsibility." The Chief of the Hall of Souls smiled. His eyes roamed Xiao Yan, who had an impassive expression. As he slowly stated, "I also hope to help end the blood feud of the members of the Xiao clan today." Xiao Yan's voice was soft, but everyone could hear the dense murderous intent contained within his words. He could not forget those many scattered incidents from back then even now. The Xiao clan had ended up breaking apart because of the Hun clan. His father had been captured and members of the clan had been killed. In the end, they were forced to leave their home and flee to spots around the Jiama Empire. At that time, he did not possess the strength to protect his clan. All he could do was set off with the burden of the blood feud. That journey had undertaken had honed his will. At the same time, his hatred for the Hall of Souls had grown. The Chief of the Hall of Souls faintly smiled upon hearing this reply. A dark black dough chi slowly surged from his body. He said, "Just attack. This chief also wishes to see just how strong you, who has experienced a lucky encounter within the demonic flame realm, has become." Bang! Before the chief of the Hall of Souls could utter all that he wanted to say, a low sonic boom was swiftly picked up by his ear. Moreover, the space in front of him shook the moment the sonic boom sounded. A figure appeared in front of him in a ghost-like fashion. Both of his fingers were curled, and a pink fire seedling happily danced in an arc. The temperature of the world rose the moment the pink fire appeared. The attack had arrived extremely quick. Even the calm chief of the Hall of Souls had a stunned expression flash across his eyes. In the next instant, the dark black dough chi on the surface of his body had agglomerated like a conditional reflex. It swiftly turned into a black shield. Chi. Both of Xiao Yan's fingers did not pause. They pressed against the shield, melting it with the dancing pink flame in an instant. After which, his fingers were like lightning as they headed toward the Hall Chief's eyes. The chief of the Hall of Souls let out a cold snort when faced with Xiao Yan's vicious strike. His body did not move. He did not act to defend against Xiao Yan's finger. Instead, he slammed his palm toward Xiao Yan's chest. He was clearly intent on exchanging his eyes for the other party's eyes. Qi, the chief of the Hall of Souls, has really schemed well. Xiao Yan laughed upon noticing the strike, but his hand did not halt. Instead, he lowered it and accurately pressed his fingers against the palm of the chief of the Hall of Souls. A pink flame flashed, and the dense black dough chi on the chief's palm quickly melted away. The chief of the Hall of Souls frowned when he felt how overbearing the purifying demonic lotus flame was. His body trembled slightly, and many after images appeared. His body reappeared in the air above. His expression was a little dark and solemn as he glanced at his palm. There was a half an inch long mark there. No blood seeped out of the wound because the surrounding blood vessels had been incinerated by the heat radiating from the purifying demonic lotus flame. It is indeed worthy of being the purifying demonic lotus flame. The chief of the Hall of Souls had been injured the moment the fight began. Although it was not serious, it still appeared quite ugly. The fight between the two seemed to be a close-quarters fight. Moreover, both parties were as fast as ghosts. Within a split second, they had clashed and separated. Other than a few sharp-eyed individuals, most people were a little dazzled by the clash. Their hearts involuntarily felt some yearning while feeling shocked. Xiao Yan lifted his head. He glanced at the chief of the Hall of Souls, but he did not say anything. His hand seals began to change with lightning, like speed. After the hand seals had changed, a 10,000-foot large spiritual illusory figure wrapped around the surface of his body, Yellow Spring Divine Anger. Xiao Yan did not dare to underestimate such an opponent. He immediately unleashed his extremely powerful Soul Sonic Wave attack the moment after his first strike. Mao! The enormous illusory figure widened its mouth, and a terrifying spiritual wave smashed toward the chief of the Hall of Souls at a speed that exceeded the speed of light. Xiao Yan, other people might be afraid of your Yellow Spring Divine Anger, but this chief isn't afraid of it. The chief of the Hall of Souls pulled back as black Du Qi erupted from his body. The Du Qi turned into an uncountable number of spiritual illusory figures in front of many stunned pairs of eyes. These illusory figures created a strange formation as they wrapped around him. Their faces were filled with devoted expressions as they knelt down. At the same time, their mouths emitted many spiritual sonic waves. 10,000 worshipping souls. Countless of spiritual sonic waves gathered in front of the chief of the Hall of Souls before they transformed into a sharp arrow that shot out and violently collided with the Yellow Spiring Divine Anger's spiritual assault. Woo 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 woo. The two spiritual sonic waves collided, and in an instant, the mountain range hummed. Many experts paled because of this spiritual fluctuation. A mouthful of fresh blood was spat out, and they pulled back with shocked faces. Just the strength of the sonic wave made them completely vulnerable. The sonic waves clashed and spread through the sky. The illusory spirits surrounding the chief of the Hall of Souls exploded one after another. Finally, all of them exploded until nothing remained. His body did not appear to suffer much damage since it had been protected. Xiao Yan ended up frowning upon seeing his attack not do much. It was the first time he had witnessed a spiritual wave attack that could match the Yellow Spring Divine Anger. This chief of the Hall of Souls was indeed knowledgeable. Moreover, the Hall Chief's soul was also at the perfect heavenly state, equal to Xiao Yan's soul state. After this exchange, Xiao Yan had discovered that the strength of the chief of the Hall of Souls had actually reached the intermediate level of the 5 of the Star Dao Sheng class. In other words, his strength had improved during these 2 years. Although your spiritual strength is powerful, I'm afraid that it is nothing but whimsical thinking of you wish to use it to defeat this chief. The chief of the Hall of Souls randomly broke the final sonic wave attack before he spoke. Xiao Yan glanced at the Hall of Souls chief but did not reply. He opened his mouth and a pink flame was spat out. Following the appearance of this pink flame, the trees around the mountain emitted puffs and ignited in front of many startled eyes, after which they turned into ashes as fierce flames raged. The chief of the Hall of Souls' eyes narrowed when he saw the pink flame float above Xiao Yan's head. His face finally revealed an extremely grave expression. If a frightening heavenly flame like this purifying demonic lotus flame were to invade his body, even he would immediately receive a serious injury. The heavenly flame ranked third on the heavenly flame ranking was not just a flame others could just talk about. This is my first time using the purifying demonic lotus flame to fight an opponent. Hopefully, you will not disappoint me. Xiao Yan lifted his head, looked at the grave-looking chief of the Hall of Souls, and spoke with a smile. Although the demonic flame is powerful, one only needs to look at who is controlling it. The chief of the Hall of Souls spoke in a faint voice. He observed Xiao Yan and the cluster of pink flames. The wisp of an extremely faint black flame suddenly flashed deep within his eyes. It clearly appeared extremely unusual. Moreover, the purifying demonic lotus flame might be powerful. But Xiao Yan narrowed his eyes. He was vaguely able to detect a strange fluctuation being emitted from within Little Yi's body. Inside this chief's body, there seems to be something present. Xiao Yan gave the chief of the Hall of Souls, who was floating in the sky above, a deep look. Both of his hands appeared like blooming lotuses as they danced and formed many after-images. Following these hand seals, the cluster of pink flames above his head emitted a swoosh sound as it shot into the sky. Finally, it rapidly wiggled in front of countless pairs of eyes. A frightening temperature was gradually emitted while the pink flame wiggled. This caused the entire world to feel like a steamer. The mountains of the fallen mountain range would occasionally combust, causing a dense smoke to rise into the sky. The du-qi of some weaker individuals showed signs of boiling. Moreover, some of those experiencing intense emotional fluctuations were startled to discover that their bodies were gradually becoming warmer. The purifying demonic lotus flame possessed the unusual ability to use one's emotions as a source to burn one's body. This discovery frightened many people into withdrawing. Only after they had exited the bounds of the mountain range did they feel the searing pain in their hearts weaken. All of their faces were filled with horror. It is indeed worthy of being the purifying demonic lotus flame by being this terrifying. The grand elders of some sects around the mountain revealed solemn and envious faces. If one were to fight someone who possessed this kind of heavenly flame, one would have to split one's attention on resisting the high temperature of the flame before the fight even started. This terrifying temperature could even easily incinerate du-qi. Xiao Yan is finally planning on using the purifying demonic lotus flame. Old man Hunmo watched this scene and frowned. Even he would find it a little troublesome to deal with the purifying demonic lotus flame. Although the chief of the Hall of Souls was a level higher than Xiao Yan, it was not impossible for him to lose if he was careless. This little fellow is really a person blessed with great luck. I once made an attempt to get this purifying demonic lotus flame back then, but I ended up returning in failure. Unexpectedly, he was able to subdue the flame with his strength. Hun Qianmo sighed before he immediately laughed. However, even if this brat really uses the purifying demonic lotus flame, he will still not find it easy to defeat Hun Mi Sheng. The chief of the Hall of Souls focused his eyes on the cluster of churning pink flames as he stood in the sky, his eyes filled with a grave expression. On top of this solemnness, there was also an unusual heat surging within them. The pink flame gradually formed a pink fireplate in front of countless pairs of eyes. The edges of the fireplate consisted of strange flame symbols. If one were to examine these symbols, one would be able to tell that these symbols were the 6 types of heavenly flames Xiao Yan had refined. In the middle of these 6 types of heavenly flame, which was the middle of the fireplate, a crystal, like pink flame, was swaying with the wind. Angry Buddha reincarnation. Xiao Yan's eyes hardened after the fireplate formed. A low cry was suddenly emitted. Buzz, buzz. The pink fireplate in the sky emitted waves of buzzing sounds after Xiao Yan's cry sounded. The fireplate then emitted a cracking sound as it slowly rotated. While it was rotating, the pink fire crystal positioned at the center of the fireplate emitted a puff sound as it suddenly shot out an arm, thick fire pillar. The pink flame was merely as thick as an arm, but it swelled with the wind the moment it rushed forward before growing hundreds of feet in size within the wind. Chi. The pink flame had just been formed when it shot toward a mountain below with terrifying speed. Upon contact, the mountain strangely vanished in front of countless pairs of eyes as though it had been made of ice. Only 1,000-foot large pit was left behind. The large pit appeared bottomless. At a glance, one was unable to see an end to it. Go! Xiao Yan's hand seal changed. A finger suddenly pointed towards the chief of the Hall of Souls in the sky, and the fireplate swiftly rose. That pink fire pillar cut through the ground, forming a 10,000-foot wide deep gully in front of many stunned eyes. It appeared as though all the objects the firebeam touched seemed to have been turned into nothing. Chi! The firebeam moved at a speed that could only be described as lightning quick. An ordinary person was only able to detect a bright flashing light before that strange pink firebeam locked onto the chief of the Hall of Souls, who was just about to pull back. Chi. After being surrounded by the pink firebeam, the majestic Do-Chi around the chief of the Hall of Souls began to swiftly melt at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although Do-Chi continued to surge out of the chief of the Hall of Souls' body, it was not able to catch up to the speed at which Do-Chi was melting. The strength of the current angry Buddha reincarnation had become overwhelming with the strengthening of the newly formed flame. If an ordinary elite Dosheng was surrounded by this light ray, that ordinary expert would likely be able to endure for half a minute or so before their Do-Chi would completely melt. At that time, even one's soul would be annihilated by the firebeam. The expressions of those experts in the sky changed when they saw the chief of the Hall of Souls' Do-Chi rapidly disappear. Their eyes were a little horrified when they glanced back at the rotating fireplate in the sky. They could detect an extremely dense and dangerous aura emanating from the firebeam. The chief of the Hall of Souls will not be able to endure for long if this continues. Everyone looked at each other as this thought flashed across their hearts. Once the Do-Chi within the chief of the Hall of Souls was completely exhausted, he would be defeated. Reincarnation restrain. Xiao Yan looked at the chief of the Hall of Souls in the sky, who was forcefully enduring the firebeam. His eyes turned slightly cold as his hands once again formed different seals. Following the change of these seals, the reincarnation fire flame suddenly began to rotate in the reverse direction at a rapid speed. Buzz buzz, the 100-foot large firebeam suddenly began to rapidly shrink after the reincarnation fireplate began to rotate in the reverse direction. Within the blink of an eye, it had shrunk to dozens of feet in size, but it did not stop there. It continued to wildly shrink. Following this rapid shrinking of the firebeam, everyone could sense an extermination energy being gathered. This is bad. Old man Hun Mo's expression immediately changed after sensing this energy. Even his heart had begun to palpitate as the firebeam shrank to the size of a thumb. Reincarnation, restrain falling. Reincarnation. A cold glint suddenly surged within Xiao Yan's eyes after the firebeam became the size of a thumb. The beam locked onto the chief of the Hall of Souls' forehead as Xiao Yan suddenly cried out, swoosh! The reincarnation fireplate in the sky trembled after this cry was made. It gradually collapsed as a red light flashed over the sky. That thumb-sized firebeam ruthlessly struck the chief of the Hall of Souls with a destructive force. Bang! A loud explosion reverberated across the sky. The frightening fire waves that were created by the beam caused some elite Doshengs to hurriedly pull back with different expressions. They were afraid to even risk the chance of coming into contact with it. It has struck. Yao Lao and the others revealed a slight joy upon seeing the beam land. Even the chief of the Hall of Souls would likely suffer after being struck by such a powerful attack. The ancestor of the Pill Tower also locked his eyes on the spot where the pink flame had exploded, but his brows were slightly knit. Has the victor been determined? Those eyes from all over the mountain looked to the sky. Some conversations appeared in waves. Xiao Yan's attack earlier was far too powerful. If nothing unexpected happened, it was not impossible for it to determine the victor. The Hall of Souls was completely silent. They had not expected the chief of the Hall of Souls to not possess the ability to even retaliate in this fight. Chi. Hun Qian-mo inserted his hands into his sleeves. He merely laughed after hearing the conversations from others. Xiao Yan floated in the sky. A mouthful of extremely hot air was spat out of his mouth. His eyes had focused on the spot where the pink flame was scattering. Although he was quite confident in his attack, he sensed that the chief of the Hall of Souls would not be so easily defeated for some unknown reason. Puff! A slight sound was suddenly emitted from the area where the pink flame was spreading. He is indeed not dead. Xiao Yan's expression was displeased upon hearing this slight sound. The caution in his heart rose. Woo-woo. Soon after Xiao Yan's voiced his thoughts, a black figure vaguely took shape in the middle of the spreading pink flame. An extremely strange suction force suddenly swept out in all directions when it appeared. The pink flame, which had been spreading out, had been sucked back in. Finally, the pink flame charged into the body of the person, slowly walking out of the flame in front of many eyes. These eyes were all filled with disbelief. He has actually absorbed the purifying demonic lotus flame into his body. Is he trying to commit suicide? The actions of the black figure immediately stirred an uproar. Clearly, everyone felt disbelief because of what he was doing. He is actually unhurt. Xiao Yan's eyes were a little stunned as they scanned the chief of the Hall of Souls as he slowly walked out of the flame. Xiao Yan felt some disbelief. The taste of the purifying demonic lotus flame is indeed delicious. However, it is unfortunately not the essence flame. I really wish to taste the essence of the purifying demonic flame. The chief of the Hall of Souls stood in the sky. He smacked his mouth and an unusual smile hung on his face. He looked at the frowning Xiao Yan. A strange black flame with an unusual devouring power was present within his eyes. Traces of it seeped out, and the energy that surrounded him was continuously sucked into his body, after which it was completely devoured by an unusual strength. Are you feeling confused? The chief of the Hall of Souls softly laughed. His face was overflowing with a strange expression. You possess the purifying demonic lotus flame, while this chief has a heavenly flame that is even stronger than it. The chief of the Hall of Souls slowly extended his hand. A cluster of unusual black flames suddenly appeared. The black flames churned and vaguely formed a human face. Waves of a devouring power erupted from the mouth of that human face. Xiao Yan's eyes suddenly narrowed to the size of a pinhole when the black flame with a human face appeared. The second on the heavenly flame ranking. Nihility Devouring Flame? A great storm had formed within Xiao Yan's heart at this moment. The Nihility Devouring Flame was a heavenly flame that was ranked second on the heavenly flame ranking. It was ranked even higher than the purifying demonic lotus flame. The mystery surrounding this heavenly flame was even thicker than the purifying demonic lotus flame. At the very least, news of the purifying demonic lotus flame had slivered across the continent. But Xiao Yan had never heard of any news relating to this Nihility Devouring Flame until now. The Nihility Devouring Flame was ranked second on the heavenly flame ranking. This flame was born from nothing. There was no image to look for, nor a form to grasp. From a certain point of view, the Nihility Devouring Flame could be considered a mysterious existence. The Nihility Devouring Flame was said to be able to devour anything. Only a small number of things in the world could resist its devouring ability. But this Nihility Devouring Flame only existed in legends. No one had ever heard about any signs of this thing. Hence, the shock within Xiao Yan's heart was relatively intense when he saw the chief of the Hall of Souls actually summon this heavenly flame, which only existed in legends. Nihility Devouring Flame. How can this be possible? How can he possess the Nihility Devouring Flame? Yao Lao had also immediately recognized the unusual black flame. An extreme shock was visible on his face as he involuntarily cried out. Everyone by the side trembled violently upon hearing these words. Even the ancestor of the Pill Tower revealed an extremely grave expression. Some of the experts around felt some uncertainty after seeing the fallen mountain range, which had become completely silent. The Nihility Devouring Flame was far too mysterious. Only an extremely few individuals were able to recognize it. Hence, many people felt somewhat at a loss when they saw the black flame in the chief of the Hall of Souls' hand. Squeak, squeak. The cluster of black flames with a human face in the hands of the chief of the Hall of Souls seemed to have become a little stronger after swallowing the pink flame. Waves of excited cries were actually being emitted from it. Xiao Yan, it seems that it is extremely satisfied with your taste. This chief has seldom seen it reveal such excitement. The chief of the Hall of Souls faintly laughed upon seeing its reaction. Xiao Yan's eyes did not blink as he stared at the cluster of black flames. He suddenly knit his brows a moment later. Finally, he slowly shook his head and softly said, "This heavenly flame of yours is not the nihility devouring flame." Many people were involuntarily startled after Xiao Yan's words sounded. Even Yao Lao was a little stunned. Other than the nihility devouring flame, no other heavenly flame possessed a devouring power. Oh, the chief of the Hall of Souls merely lifted his brow upon hearing Xiao Yan's remarks. His hand slowly rubbed the human-faced black flames in his hand and asked, "If this flame of mine is not the nihility devouring flame, why don't you tell me what it is?" Xiao Yan stared at the chief of the Hall of Souls' face and smiled. The shock within his heart also slowly drained. This nihility devouring flame was indeed able to emit a unique devouring power, but Xiao Yan was in possession of 6 types of heavenly flames. Hardly anyone on the continent possessed a better understanding of the heavenly flames than him. Hence, he vaguely sensed something was not quite right after he cooled down. This feeling that something was wrong could not be pinpointed, but he became certain in his heart, after hearing the chief's reply, the human-faced black flames in the hands of the chief of the Hall of Soul might have a relationship with the nihility devouring flame. But Xiao Yan was certain that this thing was not the true nihility devouring flame. This was a judgment that Xiao Yan could make because of his vast experience of playing with flames for over a decade. The devouring power that this flame possesses cannot be faked. It is indeed something that the nihility devouring flame possesses. However, it seems to be a little weak. Could it be that this thing is a seed flame of the nihility devouring flame? Xiao Yan's eyes stared at the chief of the Hall of Souls as he suddenly inquired. This so-called seed flame was a flame that was separate from the essence flame. A seed flame possessed some of the abilities of the essence flame, but it was a lot weaker. From a certain point of view, it could be considered an avatar of the heavenly flame. However, the ability to separate and form a seed flame was something that very few heavenly flames possessed. The old purifying demonic Lotus flame might possess such an ability, but it had not separated itself because once one separated and formed a seed flame, one would be decreasing one's strength. That demonic flame did not like the feeling of his strength being separated. Xiao Yan's eyes were staring intently at the Hall Chief's face. He was clearly able to detect the chief's eyes narrowing when the words seed flame were mentioned. As expected, Xiao Yan coldly laughed in his heart upon seeing this slight change. If this person really possessed the true nihility devouring flame, he would have already absorbed all the energy in the air by now. Why would he slowly devour it like he was doing at this moment? However, this chief possesses the seed flame of the nihility devouring flame. This means that the Han clan likely owns the true nihility devouring flame. Xiao Yan's heart was a little solemn. He had not expected to discover a hint of the foundation of the Han clan this time around. The nihility devouring flame was something that merely existed in legends. Yet, it was actually in the hands of the Han clan. This was not good news to Xiao Yan. "You are indeed worthy of being an expert at playing with fire." The chief of the Hall of Souls gently held the human-faced black flames in his hand as he laughed in a faint voice. He had quietly affirmed Xiao Yan's guess. The nihility devouring flame was extremely important to the Han clan. Although he possessed a high status, it was impossible for him to bring out its true form. Forget about whether he had the ability to control the nihility devouring flame. Even if he could, the clan would not allow anyone other than the clan head to bring it out of the Han realm. However, even if it is merely a seed flame, it is more than enough to finish you off. The chief of the Hall of Souls lifted his hand. The human face formed by the cluster of black flames widened its mouth and violently bit the chief's hand. Du Qi began to surge out of his body before being swallowed by those black flames. The chief of the Hall of Souls became a little pale after the Do Qi within his body was swallowed by the black flames. But the black flames were growing more powerful. In the end, it emitted a sharp howl from its mouth. Its originally head-sized body had become 1,000 feet tall, causing black flames to rage in the sky. Those present could sense the Du Qi within their bodies vaguely show signs of attempting to break free from their bodies. They hurriedly suppressed their Du Qi in order to avoid embarrassing themselves. Squeak, the enormous human-faced black flames drifted through the sky. Its black hollow eyes stared at Xiao Yan. The faint sound of saliva being swallowed could be making the face of the black flames appear stranger. "Devouring flame, sir. Kill him." The chief of the Hall of Souls was filled with respect as he commanded this flame. The way he addressed this cluster of flames was also different. Squeak, squeak. The human-faced black flames let out a strange cry upon hearing this command. After which, the flames whistled and moved. They penetrated through space like a ghost and sealed the space around Xiao Yan. Threads of black fire lines spread. They appeared like a cage as they trapped Xiao Yan within. This sudden scene startled everyone. No one had expected this unusual cluster of black flames to be able to unleash its own attack. What a delicious taste! The black flames wiggled, and the enormous human face once again appeared in front of Xiao Yan. It let out a sharp and strange laugh. "Obediently allow me to devour you." Bang! A frightening, devouring power erupted from the surrounding space after the black flame's sharp laughter sounded. This strength caused Xiao Yan's expression to slightly alter. He was preparing to suppress the violent heavenly flame within his body when powerful pink flames suddenly surged out of his body in all directions without any warning. This sudden, unexpected change startled Xiao Yan. He saw the pink flames quickly gather in front of him. They transformed into a palm-sized fire baby. This baby was Little Yi. Little Yi. "Quick, come back." Xiao Yan's heart pounded upon seeing this baby appear. Little Yi was the essence of 6 merged heavenly flames. Xiao Yan would really end up jumping in panic if Little Yi was swallowed by the black flames. Yi wa, Yi wa. Little Yi merely shook his small head when he heard Xiao Yan's panic cry. That tender little face strangely contained some fury as it glared at the human face. The purifying demonic Lotus flame and the nihility devouring flame were respectively ranked 3rd and 2nd. But neither was more powerful or frightening than the other. Of course, this was because no one had truly seen a fight between these two types of heavenly flames. Hence, it was impossible to predict the results, although Yi Wa was a newly formed heavenly flame from the merger of 6 heavenly flames. His instincts had mostly been taken from the purifying demonic Lotus flame, hence hearing these black flames, which were merely a seed from the main flame. Act arrogantly, provoke him, causing a fury to rise from deep within his bones. Yi Wa. In his fury, Little Yi's small body suddenly burst apart. A pink sea of flames suddenly spread across the sky. The black flame prison that the black flames had formed was forcefully shattered. And then the pink flame swept in the opposite direction and turned into an even larger fire prison. This prison had been formed to trap the cluster of black flames. The heavenly flame within Xiao Yan's body revealed its full strength under the control of Little Yi. Even when Xiao Yan personally used the flames, he would not be able to match Little Yi's control. After all, Little Yi could control the heavenly flame to a perfect and flawless extent, because his actual form was the spirit of a flame. This unexpected change had startled the nihility black flame. It hurriedly unleashed its devouring power. This time around, it was no longer so lucky. Under the personal control of Little Yi, every wisp of flame controlled its own thoughts. The results would be unpredictable if the nihility devouring flame's actual form were to swallow Little Yi, but how could a mere flame seed act skilled in front of a true grandmaster? Yi Wa. Little Yi completely ignored the devouring of the nihility black flame. The pink flame churned before transforming into a large baby that was similar in size to the huge face. After which, it firmly grabbed the large face in front of tons of pairs of stunned eyes. Little Yi appeared like he was actually planning to swallow this nihility devouring flame's flame seed. Crunch! The mouth on the human face that was formed by the nihility devouring flame emitted a somewhat miserable sharp cry after being ruthlessly bitten by Little Yi. The face began to furiously struggle. Black flames continued to erupt from the face's body. They wildly swept toward Little Yi. Yi Wa. Little Yi ignored the retaliation of the nihility devouring flame. The pink-colored flame on his body agglomerated into a crystal. Like armor, regardless of how the devouring flame emitted its devouring power, it was unable to forcefully extract the energy within Little Yi's body. Bang bang! While blocking the devouring power from the nihility devouring flame. Little Yi's tightly clenched fist continued to smash the human face and widen his mouth. Each time he swung his fist, clusters of pink flames would invade the face. The black flames had gradually become a little scattered. Bastard, you actually dare to injure me? The collapsed feeling that was being emitted from the human face made it appear somewhat frightening. It was only a seed flame of the nihility devouring flame, while little Yi was a fire spirit formed from the merger of 6 types of heavenly flames, including the purifying demonic Lotus flame. Forget about a mere flame seed. Even if its actual form were to appear, it would not be easy to defeat Xiao Yan. Yi Wa. The current little Yi's intelligence seemed to be increasing. Not only could he understand the human language, even the emotions on his small face were becoming more life-like. Hence, a ferocity surged onto his small face after he heard the nihility devouring flame's cry. His hand grabbed the huge human face as a monstrous pink flame surged out of his palm. This flame actually wrapped around the nihility devouring flame. You dare to refine me? You are seeking death. The actions of little Yi caused a horror to rise onto that human face. Its mouth cried out in a stern voice. The nihility devouring flame had never met anything that could resist its devouring power during all these years. But its mysterious ability, which it was proud of, was completely useless this time around. This is bad. I have lost connection with the fire seed. The chief of the Hall of Souls, who was standing a short distance away, suddenly revealed a different expression. At this moment, the connection between him and the nihility devouring flame's flame seed had been severed. The heavenly flame within this brat's body had undergone a mutation. It is unafraid of the nihility devouring flame's devouring power. I have really miscalculated this time around. The eyes of the chief of the Hall of Souls rapidly flickered. He immediately clenched his teeth and his body rushed toward the pink fire barrier in the sky. Although this was only a seed flame, it was something that he had spent a long time begging for from the clan. If he slowly refined it, his body would also end up possessing a devouring power. Although this devouring power could not be compared with the nihility devouring flame, it could be considered a killing blow when fighting with others. Moreover, he would have difficulty accounting to the clan if he lost it. Hence, he could not allow any accidents to happen to it. Haha, Hall Chief, other people should not intervene in the fight between heavenly flames. However, the chief of the Hall of Souls had only just moved when a figure appeared in front of him like a shadow. That smiling figure belonged to Xiao Yan, who had been watching the chief. The expression of the chief of the Hall of Souls turned cold when he saw Xiao Yan intervene and block him. He wasn't bothered by his diminished Do Qi after it had been devoured by the nihility devouring flame earlier. His body moved and unleashed his sharpest, most ferocious attack on Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan merely smiled because of this wild and violent attack from the chief of the Hall of Souls. He could clearly sense that the current chief of the Hall of Souls was much weaker when compared to earlier. From the looks of it, the nihility devouring flame had swallowed a lot of his Do Qi earlier. The chief of the Hall of Souls was naturally no longer able to pose much of a threat to Xiao Yan in this state. The both of them once again unleashed fierce attacks, while little Yi in the sky widened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of pink flames. These flames were poured into the flame cluster in front of him. That nihility devouring flame, which was only able to barely block the pressure from the surrounding flames, was finally unable to endure the pressure at this moment. A miserable screech was let out. The black flames that had formed a human face exploded apart. They transformed into black fire snakes that randomly entered and exited the pink fire cluster like headless houseflies. This is bad. The explosion of the nihility devouring flame caused the expressions on the faces of Hun Qianmo and Old Man Hun Mo to drastically change. Both of them exchanged glances and simultaneously rushed forward. They were planning on intervening to rescue the nihility devouring flame. Are you planning to break the rules? The expressions of Yao Lao's group turned slightly cold upon seeing them move. Both Xiao Chen and the ancestor from the Pill Tower swiftly rushed forward and blocked Hun Qianmo duo. At the same time, the remaining Dao Sheng class experts from the Sky Mansion Alliance moved and restrained the few elite Dao Shengs from the Hall of Souls. In an instant, the fallen mountain had become extremely tense. A complete chaotic battle would erupt at the first sign of a disagreement. Hun Qianmo, my Sky Mansion Alliance is not the least bit afraid of you if the Hall of Souls wishes for an all-out war, Yao Lao cried out in a stern voice. Hun Qianmo narrowed his eyes. He slowly swept his eyes around him. The lineup from both parties was about the same. If they were to really fight, the Hall of Souls would definitely end up with a miserable victory if they even could win. Such a lose was something that the Hun clan was trying its best to avoid. What should we do? A cold glint surged within the eyes of old man Hun Mo as he softly asked. Hun Qian Mo stared intently at the young green-clothed man in front of him. The young man maintained a calm expression. His tender eyes were like a quiet lake, appearing unfathomable. Hun Qian Mo had exchanged blows with the young man earlier and naturally understood just how frightening this old demon, who had lived for thousands of years, was. He knew that it would be difficult to defeat the other party even if he unleashed his entire strength. Everything will continue as it is. Hun Qian Mo inhaled a deep breath of air before stating in a low and deep voice. Both parties relaxed slightly after hearing his words. They immediately pulled back some distance. That extremely tense atmosphere was forcefully suppressed. Bang! Little Yi's huge baby hand slammed into the fire cluster when both parties pulled back. That cluster of flames began to wildly rotate before transforming into a firestorm that completely shattered the black flame fire snakes. Finally, he opened his mouth and swallowed the firestorm into his stomach. Although the devouring power was a mysterious energy that only the nihility devouring flame possessed, the heavenly flames were just like wild beasts. The strong devoured the weak. Due to them coming from a similar origin, the more powerful flame frequently consumed the weaker flame. When Xiao Yan had wanted to obtain the falling heart flame in the past, the flame had coveted the green lotus core flame within Xiao Yan's body. The nihility devouring flame was ranked second on the heavenly flame ranking. If one were to talk about it, it should be a little stronger than the purifying demonic lotus flame. However, this current devouring flame was merely a seed flame. It was extremely easy for little Yi to consume it. Brub, little Yi emitted a strange sound from his throat after devouring the seed flame. He immediately patted his stomach in an expression of satisfaction. His body swayed and returned to the size of a lotus. After which, his gaze shifted to Xiao Yan, who was battling the chief of the Hall of Souls. Only then did it drift to a spot some distance away from the battleground in front of many pairs of eyes. He beckoned with his hand, and many slowly rotating fire lotuses began to quietly roll around his body. The chief of the Hall of Souls, who was entangled with Xiao Yan, caught a glimpse of these lotuses through his peripheral vision. His heart was so shocked that it trembled. Before he could pull back, little Yi's fleshy hand pointed him out. "Yiwa, beat!" Swoosh! Little Yi's voice had just appeared when over 10 fire lotuses formed a line that swiftly shot through the sky and wildly exploded on the chief of the Hall of Souls. Rumble, the 10 fire lotuses continuously exploded in the sky. A terrifying fire wave swept apart with a frighteningly high temperature. Those experts, who had originally withdrawn a great distance, once again hurriedly pulled back. Humph. The 10 fire lotuses might have only been formed by 2 different heavenly flames, but they had stirred a domino effect after the first one exploded. Their might was so strong that it was frightening. Even someone as strong as the chief of the Hall of Souls was blasted until he emitted a muffled moan. A green smoke was miserably formed around his body as he hurriedly pulled back in the sky. The figure floating in the sky pulled back by 10,000 feet. That figure, the chief of the Hall of Souls, finally forcefully stabilized his body. He swallowed the fresh blood that reached his throat. Some shock appeared within his eyes. He had not expected this unassuming fire baby to actually possess such a powerful fighting strength. Hall of Souls chief, you will perhaps lose this match. The moment the chief of the Hall of Souls was feeling shocked by little Yi's powerful fighting strength, a ghost-like figure suddenly appeared behind him. A sharp wind mercilessly struck his neck. In your dreams. The attack came swiftly, but the chief of the Hall of Souls also reacted quickly. He instinctively turned his body, and a punch clashed with Xiao Yan's palm wind. A deep sound exploded at the point of contact. The bodies of the two were sent flying backwards. You are still a little lacking if you wish to kill this chief. The eyes of the chief of the Hall of Souls were gloomy as he glared at Xiao Yan while he flew backwards. He cried out in a dense voice, "Consider yourself lucky this time around. This chief will personally take revenge the next time around. Perhaps you will not have the opportunity." A chill surged within Xiao Yan's eyes, and an icy cold smile rose from the corner of his mouth. The chief of the Hall of Souls' heart became slightly cold after seeing Xiao Yan's expression. He seemed to have sensed something as he suddenly turned his head. A high temperature pounced over. Another 10 fire lotuses formed a straight line in front of his eyes as they rushed over with lightning-like speed. They violently collided with his body in front of the many shocked eyes from the people all over the mountains. How is this possible? The heart of the chief of the Hall of Souls was shocked because of the frighteningly wild energy that was on a collision course with his body. Rumble. An enormous firestorm swept across the sky. Its terrifying temperature caused the originally moist land to dry and even began to crack apart. Other than some elite Du Shengs, no one else dared to step within 10,000 feet from the fallen peak. The chief of the Hall of Souls has actually been defeated. The entire mountain range became completely silent as they watched this firestorm sweep through the sky. After being struck head-on by such a ferocious attack, even if the chief of the Hall of Souls could retain his life, he would not be in a good state. It was likely that the victor had been decided. A grave expression surged in the eyes of many people after experiencing this thought. The chief of the Hall of Souls had been a renowned peak expert within the Central Plains for a long time. His fierce reputation had caused many factions to tremble upon hearing his name, establishing the Hall of Souls as the overlord of the region. Now, however, this expert, who had once stirred a bloody storm across the Central Plains, had been defeated by the hands of an up-and-coming member of the younger generation. After this battle, the name of both Xiao Yan and the Sky Mansion Alliance would undoubtedly become extremely dazzling across the Central Plains. This lad is extraordinary. The position of the overlord of the Central Plains will likely change. The Grand Elders and experts of some factions felt such a thought flash through their hearts. They looked at a certain figure in the sky, and an additional solemnness and respect was present in their eyes. The strong were forever honored in this world. The many experts from the Sky Mansion Alliance on the fallen mountain revealed joy on their faces at this moment. Their eyes were filled with pride as they stared at the skinny figure in the sky. The reason Xiao Yan was able to possess such a great reputation within the Sky Mansion Alliance was because of the many battles he had experienced. After this battle today, his status as the spiritual leader of the Sky Mansion Alliance was sealed. If the result of the battle today were to be transmitted back to the Sky Mansion, there was no telling what kind of a commotion it would stir. Everyone understood the meaning of this battle. From today on, if one were to rank the factions of the Central Plains, this one mansion would be ranked above the one hall. In the future, the overlord of the Central Plains would be the Sky Mansion Alliance, compared to the joy on the Sky Mansion's side. The Hall of Souls was completely silent. Those experts faced each other. They were all a little absent-minded. Not long ago, the mighty reputation of the Hall of Souls still existed within the Central Plains. Any expert who heard this name would reveal a face covered with fear and horror. Yet within these short few years, the overlord, who possessed a reputation that had once caused one's expression to change, had tasted the bitterness of defeat for the first time. I want to see how you will explain this to the clan. Old man Hun Mo revealed a volatile expression. Those surrounding gazes were extremely irritating. He swung his sleeve and furiously cried out, "The one who laughs last is the true victor. If we did not even possess patience, our Hun clan would have long since disappeared from this world." Hun Qianmo's expression might appear a little sinister, but he still remained indifferent. He coldly glanced at Old Man Hun Mo and chided him. Old Man Hun Mo's mouth opened upon hearing this scolding. However, he quickly shut his mouth. His face was filled with the dissatisfaction he felt. Hun Qianmo's eyes were dark and cold. The shriveled fist under his sleeve was tightly clenched. "You can all rejoice. Once my Hun clan's plans begin, the Sky Mansion Alliance will be completely annihilated with a flick of his finger." A countless number of people below had various thoughts lingering in their hearts. The firestorm in the sky slowly scattered. A charred black figure shot out of the storm. That completely black figure was covered with many ferocious-looking wounds. It was even vaguely possible to see some pulsing inner organs. His aura was so weak that it was almost impossible to detect. Clearly, he had suffered an extremely serious injury. Chief of the Hall of Souls. Everyone felt their hearts tense upon seeing the figure. This miserable appearance was naturally the Chief of the Hall of Souls, who had been ruthlessly struck. From his appearance, it was obvious that he no longer had any ability to fight. At this moment, some of the experts from the Hall of Souls, who had been holding out for a miracle, felt completely hopeless. Xiao Yan, this chief will not forget this grudge. The chief of the Hall of Souls slowly landed on the ground in a weak manner. However, he struggled to open both of his blurry eyes. A hoarse and weak voice was slowly emitted before being transmitted into Xiao Yan's ear from the sky. Xiao Yan's indifferent eyes stared at the chief of the Hall of Souls, who had suddenly landed. A cold glint flashed within his eyes. One should get rid of a problem at its roots. This chief of the Hall of Souls might be seriously injured, but with the skills of the Hun clan, he would probably be lively again after resting for a couple of months. At that time, he might be able to command the Hall of Souls into causing some trouble. This was something that Xiao Yan did not like to see. Since you have been defeated, you should leave your life behind. A murderous intent surged within Xiao Yan's heart. He moved and descended toward the chief of the Hall of Souls with lightning-like speed in front of many pairs of eyes. From his surging murderous intent, it was obvious that he was intending to deliver a final blow while his opponent was down. "Xiao Yan, how dare you?" This sudden, unexpected change also startled the members from the Hall of Souls. They did not expect Xiao Yan to be this ruthless. Not only had he won, he was also planning to kill. You should repay some of the blood debt you owe to my Xiao clan." Xiao Yan completely ignored those cries. His body flashed and appeared above the head of the chief of the Hall of Souls. His palm furiously slammed toward the top of the chief's head. From the looks of his sharp palm wind, the chief's head would definitely split like a watermelon if struck. The eyes of the seriously injured chief of the Hall of Souls, who was paralyzed, revealed a horror in the face of death after seeing the palm wind falling from above his head. "Xiao Yan, you are seeking death." A furious thunder-like cry suddenly rumbled beside Xiao Yan's ear just as his palm was about to strike the Hall of Souls chief's head. The space around Xiao Yan's body became distorted. Hun Qianmo appeared with a gloomy expression. His shriveled fist was clenched as it smashed toward Xiao Yan with lightning-like speed. From the looks of it, he was intending to force Xiao Yan to stop his attack. A cold glint flashed across Xiao Yan as Hun Qianmo attacked. His palm wind did not weaken. A thought passed through his mind, and Little Yi appeared on his shoulder. Little Yi waved his small hand, and many fire lotuses quickly flew forward, after which they collided with Hun Qianmo's hand. Bang bang! A hot fire wave swiftly spread from the explosion. However, that shriveled fist penetrated the fire wave and smashed into Xiao Yan's chest with lightning-like speed. Grug! Xiao Yan spat out a mouthful of fresh blood after suffering a serious injury. Hun Qianmo's punch contained the desire to kill. Fortunately, there was some fire lotuses obstructed it. Hence, it was not fatal despite injuring Xiao Yan. Moreover, Xiao Yan's palm had still managed to ruthlessly smash into the head of the chief of the Hall of Souls when Hun Qianmo's punch landed on his body. Bang! Xiao Yan's palm contained an extremely great strength, hence the chief of the Hall of Souls' head was blasted into a bloody mist. Additionally, the lingering force wildly roamed around his body and blasted it into a complete mess. Xiao Yan did not continue to observe the body after managing to strike his target. He swallowed the blood in his mouth and quickly withdrew. Bastard! Xiao Yan's body had just pulled back when Hun Qianmo discovered that the chief of the Hall of Souls' body had been blasted into a complete mess. His eyes turned crimson. A roar that was filled with murderous intent reverberated around the sky. He lifted his head and glared at Xiao Yan. His hand grabbed across the distance, and the space where Xiao Yan was flying collapsed, sealing Xiao Yan in the process. Die! Hun Qianmo's body flashed after sealing the space around Xiao Yan. His face was filled with a ferocity as he appeared in front of Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan's eyes were sinister as they stared at the ferocious Hun Qianmo. A thought passed through his heart, and the extermination fire lotus began to gather in his palm under his sleeve. Hun Qianmo, deaths and injuries are unavoidable during a battle. You should not break the rules. The green-clothed figure slowly appeared in front of Xiao Yan, just as Xiao Yan was about to unleash the extermination fire lotus on this old demon. A calm voice followed. It was the ancestor from the Pill Tower. "Old ghost, are you really planning to completely oppose my Hun clan?" Hun Qianmo's eyes were dense as he stared at the ancestor from the Pill Tower before uttering each word with a pause. "Hun Qianmo, it is pointless to threaten me." The ancestor from the Pill Tower merely smiled before giving a reply after hearing Hun Qianmo's threat. Hun Qianmo's shriveled face twitched. He was aware that it was impossible for him to kill Xiao Yan today, with the ancestor from the Pill Tower obstructing him. His eyes gloomily glanced at Xiao Yan. His hoarse voice was filled with a murderous desire. Xiao Yan, it is not easy to kill a member of my Han clan. Your fate will definitely be 100 times more miserable than Xiao Xuan in the future. Thank you for informing me. Xiao Yan coldly laughed. It was not the first time he had heard such words from a member of the Han clan. The next time we battle, your Sky Mansion Alliance will be exterminated. Han Qianmo swung his sleeves. He gave a dense, cold smile before turning around and rushing back to the chief of the Hall of Souls' exploded body. A black fog surged from his hand, and he absorbed the shattered soul of the chief into the fog, after which he landed on the ground with a dark and solemn expression. He did not speak. Instead, his body moved and he rushed out of the fallen mountain range. Those experts from the Hall of Souls could only follow behind him in a dejected manner. Unfortunately, I was unable to completely incinerate the chief of the Hall of Souls' soul. Xiao Yan grinned as the members of the Hall of Souls left. He felt somewhat regretful. That old fellow had managed to collect the remains of the soul of the chief of the Hall of Souls. Given the abilities of the Han clan, it might be possible to revive him. You are too greedy. The Han clan is not as easy to deal with as you imagine. The ancestor of the Pill Tower turned around. He stared at Xiao Yan before he shook his head and softly laughed. I never believed that anyone would be able to deal with the Hall of Souls in the past. However, I am beginning to believe it slightly at this moment. This descendant of the Xiao clan might really be able to achieve the ambition that Xiao Xuan was unable to complete back then. The Fallen Mountain battle, which had shook the entire Central Plains, had finally come to an end with the defeat of the chief of the Hall of Souls, leaving many feeling that they had not watched their fill. The final result had somewhat exceeded many people's expectations. The Hall of Souls, a faction that had stood as the overlord of the Central Plains for hundreds of years, had finally met a powerful faction that could keep them in check after having acted fearless and overbearing for such a long time, the Sky Mansion Alliance. An alliance made up of a couple of large factions, which had not been given high regards by those from the older generations, had begun to rise at a shocking speed after a couple of years of integration. Moreover, the number of experts gathered in the alliance had also caused some of the old factions to feel ashamed. A Dosheng-class expert was an ancestor that guarded the sect, but this Sky Mansion Alliance had a total of 10 of them. This number had caused everyone to understand that the Sky Mansion Alliance had not simply relied on luck to survive until this day. This became very apparent when these elite Du Shengs were led by an expert who had defeated a 5-star Dao Sheng, the chief of the Hall of Souls. That shock was unmatchable after this battle. Everyone understood that the reputation of the Sky Mansion Alliance would spread to every corner of the Central Plains. That grand battle would undoubtedly be spread by an uncountable number of people in a respectful fashion. The transfer of the position of Overlord shook the Central Plains. The result of the Fallen Mountain battle had stirred an earth-shaking level of shock and joy after being transmitted back to the Sky Mansion Alliance. During this half a month's time, the entire alliance had descended into a wild joy. From this moment forth, the Sky Mansion Alliance would possess an unmatchable reputation within the Central Plains. All the members of the alliance, including the outermost members, would be able to stick their chests out with great pride when interacting with others, because the uniform on their chests displayed a badge that told everyone that they belonged to the alliance. The glory of the alliance was also their glory. While the entire Sky Mansion Alliance had descended into a wild joy, no one forgot the person who had brought them this victory. That earth-shaking battle was repeated from individual to individual and was regarded as the most outstanding battle among outstanding battles. Xiao Yan was being described as a divine being. These rumors caused Xiao Yan to involuntarily break into a stunned smile. However, these rumors had caused many members of the Sky Mansion Alliance to treat him like a divine being whom they could not offend. This was a blind respect. It was the faith of a believer. After one's reputation had accumulated to a certain extent, it would quietly rise in one's heart. The respect these alliance members felt for Xiao Yan was rising with a fervor. Yao Lao and the others were a little surprised at this situation, but they did not hinder this respect because such faith would increase their cohesion. Moreover, the only person in the Sky Mansion Alliance who had the ability to instill such faith was Xiao Yan. The wild joy within the alliance continued for half a month before it gradually calmed down. Although the excitement of the ordinary members was a little crazy, the upper echelons of the alliance continued to remain calm. This narrow victory against the Hall of Souls gained the Alliance an immeasurable amount of benefits. However, being in this peak spot would also mean that they would face open hostility and hidden schemes. In the past, the Hall of Souls was extremely powerful. Under the deterrence of its ferocity, no one dared to act against it. However, the Sky Mansion Alliance had risen a little too quickly. It had only been established for a very short period of time. Some of the old factions within the Central Plains plotted against it with ill intent. After all, the Sky Mansion Alliance and the Hall of Souls were fundamentally different. The Hall of Souls was extremely ruthless in everything they did. They completely ignored all other factions. If they had not possessed the secret support of the Hun clan, a resistance would have already formed given their actions. Now, the Sky Mansion Alliance had leapt ahead and become the new overlord. Naturally, it would not be able to adopt the same approach as the Hall of Souls. After all, they were not backed by an existence like the Hun clan, hence. Soon after the big battle came to an end, the upper echelons issued orders to strictly prohibit any members from acting arrogant and overbearing toward others. All their actions should remain as usual. Those who disobeyed would be expelled from the Alliance, under the suppression of this harsh punishment. The Sky Mansion Alliance appeared extremely calm from the perspective of others after obtaining a great victory. Hardly any matters that could damage the Alliance spread. Causing many people to quietly nod, they held the Alliance in higher regard. Although the Sky Mansion Alliance had surpassed the Hall of Souls was still in existence. Moreover, it did not suffer a great loss. They were looking at the Alliance with ill intent and waiting for it to make a mistake before attacking again, while the Sky Mansion Alliance was steadily rising. An increasing number of factions across the Central Plains who hated the Hall of Souls began to join. These people had been afraid of the Hall of Souls in the past, hence they chose to endure their hatred, now that this Sky Mansion Alliance had appeared out of nowhere and had surpassed the Hall of Souls. It was only natural for these people to swarm over and join them. The Alliance did not simply randomly absorb this huge number of members. They adopted a strict and complicated selection process before accepting them as outer Alliance members. An exception was made only to those who were extremely strong and could be trusted, allowing them to be absorbed into the inner Alliance. This orderly absorption caused the strength of the huge Sky Mansion Alliance to quietly soar once again. A stream wandered through the forest within the deepest part of the Star Realm. It soon transformed into a silver waterfall that quickly fell down. Landing in a clear lake below, a human figure was seated on the surface of the water at the middle of the lake. He did not move. The ripples that fluctuated and spread across the water automatically disappeared when they were 10 meters away from him. Like there was an extremely quiet aura around him that was giving him a strange appearance. Buzz. This silence continued for around half a day before the human figure finally opened his tightly shut eyes. A faint fire glow flashed across his dark, black eyes. He lowered his head. He frowned as he glanced at his palm. There was a black bead suspended half an inch above his palm. The color of the bead was an extremely deep black. At a glance, it appeared just like a small black hole. It even felt like it was trying to pull one's soul into it. The human figure was naturally Xiao Yan. 3 months had passed since the battle at the Fallen Mountain. During these 3 months, the Sky Mansion Alliance seemed to have undergone a complete transformation. Repeated and drastic changes continued to occur, but Xiao Yan did not intervene in these matters. He was not really good when it came to managing the faction. Forcing himself to get involved would only lead to more losses than gains. Yao Lao was also clearly aware of this point. Hence, he allowed Xiao Yan to train alone and did not disturb him. Xiao Yan spent all of his free time in training. Xiao Xiao got along very well with the little fairy doctor and Qing Lin. Hence, she did not really stick beside Xiao Yan. Moreover, there was also the old-fashioned and strict Xiao Chen constantly monitoring her training. So he ended up with the most free time after the big battle. These 3 months of training did increase Xiao Yan's strength. Currently, he had stabilized as an initial 5-star Daosheng, even though the flame mantra had already evolved into a quasi-Tian-class Qi method. The 3 months of energy absorption was merely a drop in an ocean for Xiao Yan. Only at this moment did he discover just how difficult it was to raise one's strength in the Daosheng class unless there were some special circumstances. Although these 3 months of training did not allow Xiao Yan to increase his level, he still managed to make an exceptional gain. This gain came from when little Yi had swallowed the Nihility Devouring Flame's flame seed. The nihility devouring flame was said to be able to devour anything. It could even swallow energy and do qi, and was incomparably overbearing. Its strange devouring power would cause one to feel envious. Moreover, the thing that caused one's heart to be truly attracted to it was that as long as one was able to refine a flame seed from the nihility devouring flame, one would gain the chance of obtaining its ability. Although this ability was not comparable to the nihility devouring flame, it was extremely useful for training. Hence, Xiao Yan had spent most of his time studying that devouring power. Xiao Yan's observations had not exceeded his expectations. A black-colored bead had gradually formed within Xiao Yan's body after little Yi swallowed the nihility devouring flame's flame seed, since both of them were heavenly flames. Xiao Yan could sense a devouring power, which could even swallow one's soul within this bead. Xiao Yan rejoiced after having obtained this black bead, which contained that devouring power. If he could gain this devouring power, he would undoubtedly be able to train a lot more effectively. But his joy did not last for long before he discovered something terrible. If this bead was placed in his body, it would gradually swallow the do qi within his body. Moreover, Xiao Yan was even vaguely able to sense that his life force was also being absorbed along with his do qi. Xiao Yan had discovered that the energy absorbed by this devouring power was extremely impure, and the impurities within this energy agglomerated together because of the devouring power. It was extremely difficult to remove these impurities even when he used his heavenly flame. He was unable to absorb the energy that had been devoured. This damn thing. Xiao Yan's expression had become quite ugly after sensing this situation. This thing was not only useless, it was also harmful. From the looks of this devouring power, an ordinary person would really not be blessed to enjoy it. Xiao Yan shook his head in disappointment. He glanced at the black bead before flipping his hand. He was just about to store it in his storage ring when a pink flame escaped his hand. Little Yi appeared, his flabby hand wrapped around the bead as desire filled his little face. Huh? Xiao Yan was startled upon seeing little Yi appear.